With all the food and the drinks and everything that the chips that we've got on the table, we've got to again focus on health. So Cindy is here to remind us, having a healthy mind and healthy habits. So Cindy.
Good morning, everyone. For all the newcomers that missed our sessions yesterday, my name is Cindy. I'm a holistic therapist, and I represent the Hive Mind Sustainability and Staff Wellness programs. And so my task is to make sure that all of you stay awake between these interesting conversations. So I'm going to invite you to quickly just do a brain reset with me. So if you'll indulge me again. So we're going to start with placing your left hand at the base of your spine or at the base of your skull. And then the right hand, we're going to breathe in. So tapping in the middle of the brain, breathing in. Exaggerate your in-breath. And on the out-breath, we're going to tap on the chest. So breathing out. So the idea is to wake up the left and the right side of the brain. So breathing in, making sure we store all of this positive data. And breathing out. Nice deep breath in. And release. One final breath. Nice deep belly breath in, making sure all of the senses are awake, left and right side of the brain active. And breathing out. So I'm going to leave you with two questions. What is one healthy habit that you are already doing on a daily basis, whether it is mentally, emotionally, physically, to make sure that as the leader of your business, you are giving the best that you can? And if you don't have any, what are the healthy habits that you are ready to start from today? Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Just don't hit your head too hard, I would say. Before we start the session, I'd like to just remind you about innovation. And what, if I get that slider there, that'd be great. If we can just bring that up on the screen, yeah. So innovation fails when you don't have a clear path. You do not have the right journey, or you don't have the adequate resources. You might say, listen, I don't have time, or I don't have money. There are lots of things that's excuses, right? Innovation is not something innovation is there are frictions in innovation. If you add lots of money, doesn't mean that you're going to have great innovation. Innovation is really having a lot of frictions and dealing with that. And I think we spoke about it in this previous session about the failure to understand consumer and customer needs. Who are you producing for? The resistance to change. We've always done it this way. It's always worked for us. Lack of collaboration. I want to do everything by myself. That doesn't really work. Failure to embrace failure. And that's a very important one because you've got to allow your team to experiment. You've got to allow your team to fail. Nothing is just works out from the word go. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes perseverance. And not to have a short-term focus. So let's start with this important session, knowing about the customer, the consumer dynamics, and market development. The intro note is Louis von Zeuner, and the discussion lead Nzamazi Yalisa. Thanks a lot to the panel.
Seeing more instances of what we call acute impacts of climate change, droughts, hail, significant storm events. But there's also the chronic effects, changes in temperature locally that changes the growing patterns for farmers.
So what the Global Positive Agriculture team has done is they've started mapping climate change on a climate impact assessment tool to really determine the suitability of crop type by region.
We've all come here to really engage in activation of a global agriculture strategy. The strategy centers around 4 objectives. We're going to invest in more variety capability, ensure that we build capability with our own agri teams around the world, and also build capability with farmers. The third pillar is around ensuring our growth. Things are changing. Climate change is causing a lot of changes. So we want to do that with an eye towards where are the best places to grow our business. Driving productivity is a really important part of what we're going to be doing globally as well.
PepsiCo as a whole realized that it is very important for us to have an agricultural footprint at heart of what we do. What we're trying to achieve overall is to gain a long-term competitive advantage that is beneficial to both us and to our suppliers, but then ultimately then, rewarding our customers with the best quality at the best price at the right time.
Can go in.
Okay, good morning to everyone. I'm sure we'll, during the course of the discussion, start to understand who's who, etc. Let me start by saying we're talking about the consumer, the customer. We talk about markets. We talk about change. Now, just as I was sitting here, Carmen, ek het teruggedink aan die dae toe ek nou ook nog lekker jonk soos jy en Louis was, kon nou lekker jou notes hier onderhou en jy kan lees, maar ek wil, vir my is dit nou net 'n blur, so ek moet dit nou bietjie opbring. En dan moet ek sê, ek is ook bly dat ons nie vir Rassie in die kamer het vandag nie, want as hy nou na die health demonstrasie gekyk het jy nou al gedink as die Springbokke halftyd gaan staan, vashou en onthou Rassie se tyd met die rooi en geel kaart, daai man lief innovasie en so ja, tyd en plek vir alles. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you. It's always an honor for us that's on panel today to be with those that provides the food on the table to South Africans. And what we're talking about today when we speak about customer and markets, my background is in banking. In ABSA, we went through a major change when we changed the brands from the Volkskas brand to ABSA. Subsequently, 4 big banks wasn't good enough. And smaller entrants came in to eat our lunch. And just as we thought that we've settled down, here we are in the era of fintechs and non-banks having a go at the lunch of all of us. So change being inevitable, but change also extremely important. And for us as producers, whether it's business, in every change, there are unmet needs and opportunities. And that really is where our focus should be. The threat is not the change. The threat is us not moving with the change. And that is what is so important today for us as we think about the future, the business. The question quite often, the previous panel touched on so many things that is relevant even to this discussion. When they spoke about data, they spoke about innovation, etc., etc. So for us, and my message to you, don't be threatened by change, don't be threatened by the unknown, but embrace it and move with it and take the right decisions at the right time. It was also said by the previous panel that today we are swamped with data. There's data everywhere, research, any bit of information is available. And as you are threatened by that overload of data, here comes an opportunity with artificial intelligence to work through that data, analyze that data, and inform your decisions. It is not that we will be taken out and over by that technology, but it is the opportunity to understand better, to analyze better, and take better decisions. And that is what will keep us relevant as we move forward. Quite important today, through every change that we've gone through, is being close to your customer relationships. Those are the issues that, despite all the change, still lies at the core of what we are doing, should be doing, and keeping ourselves busy with. But, I mean, just leading in on this discussion, it is important to just reflect on research and information out in the marketplace. And for that, again, you can, today with AI and ChatGPT and Claude, it makes it quite easy to access the information out of a McKinsey's, a BCG, a Deloitte, and they did research across 18 countries as to some of these shifts that is taking place for the consumer. And I'd want to just touch on 5 of that shifts and illustrate the opportunities, the unmet needs that lie within those opportunities. And again, the plea to make this environment of data analytics and understanding part of your business. It is so important that if we move, that we keep pace. And to keep pace, you need from time to time to really cut through unnecessary information and get to the core and get to the right information. So in the past, when, there's a few gentlemen that has the grey and the boldness. So you will recall we had our time when, for us, when we felt confident, we just bought. We were looking for that oil stain in the parking lot just to say, it's my car, I now need to replace it. You know how we worked at that time. And then when we felt nervous, we pulled back on all the spend and went quiet. Now, McKinsey's in one of the research, they talk about the decoupling of sentiment and spending. And they say people now spend deliberately, not just cautiously. They will only pay where they see genuine value. And the unmet need that comes from that behavior is they buy honest nourishment at a fair price. So the first shift that some of this research brought to the fore was that in terms of genuine value, honest nourishment at a fair price. And when I reflect on that unmet need, I think of your product, the product we're talking today, and how that product already has all the potential to address exactly that. Then the second issue when we speak about today is one of health. But it was also mentioned in the previous panel. Despite all this focus on health, it doesn't come at the expense of the need of the human individual to have joy. So it is still an issue that one of the biggest drivers of what people buy, they want happiness and joy. And Nielsen, in their research, speak about self-directed health consumers. And what they're saying to us is that that consumer today is a consumer that reads a label it chases a function. It is sensitive to issues like salt and sugar, etc., etc. But it is still important to say that trifecta, with the emphasis going to health, is that the consumer today is extremely sensitive to food that what combines what is good for you, good to eat, and affordable. The third item that came out of the research of many is that the need of the consumer must be met where they already are. And the statement made in the McKinsey's report is that the journey of I'm hungry to I am buying today flows through a screen. The customer research, the customer compare, the customer asks of artificial intelligence for recommendation on what they should do prior to going to the supermarket or standing in front of a shelf or getting into online shopping. Therefore, out of this change speaks an unmet need that presence today is extremely important to the consumer, because your produce and your story must be visible to the customer and to the people that you serve. And the question and the unmet need also for us is, are we on the phone? Are we there when he opens up? And are we top of mind? That is the important thing, that don't be threatened by the change. Welcome the opportunity by pushing your story, your product, your brand. I started off by saying my background is banking, and we had to change a brand like Volkskas that some of you might know and a lot of you weren't even born by then, change it to an ABSA. But you had to be present with a brand that people can associate with. That presence is extremely important. Then the need of the moment. Now, what is important is that people like spending on experiences. They like the meal out. They like that simple moment of sharing. Food is not only the fuel that we spoke about in the past. It is today how people connect. And one of the gentlemen on the previous panel spoke about joy. And it's always important that, if we think about change, there's new things, new opportunities, but there's things that remains the same, whichever time of day, whichever era, and that enjoyment, that connection, that be with people, that everyday pleasure might have different formats today, but it's still important. And then the fifth one, the last one, is really time. The McKinsey research said that your average consumer today have 3 extra hours a week. And that 3 hours they spend online and alone. Now, at my left-hand side, he did say that I may not say that we're on the board of Wilder-Klawer, so I won't say that. But I'm sure, Louis, it resonates to say more time online, where they buy, how they buy. Households today are smaller, meals need to be quicker, and the scarcest of it all is time. So the unmet need of the time management of the consumer lies in convenience. Food that is fast, easy, and ready. And I think, I always want to stop there to say that change and wonderful opportunities that we have, take it on. Live with this change. Be ahead of the curve. Enjoy the ride. And also surround you with the right people that make these behaviors their business, their knowledge to inform, because at the end of the day, we all drive a sustainable business. What is the biggest thing that we talk about today is changing of generations in farming. Why? Because we all want sustainable business. And then when we have a platform like this, MZ, we can never say and never not mention that us as food producers, us as business today, we look at the product of a potato, and then we must stand back and think of those in our community that goes hungry. Why? It's the biggest threat to sustainability that we don't feed our youth and our people. And as we get consumed by what is right for business and where to go with our business, let's never forget our responsibility to those that might not have, because they are also the future of this country. So, MZ, that is sort of opening comments.
Thank you, Louis. Before we start, I think we should introduce our panelists. My name is Mzimasi Jalisa. I'm an upcoming farmer from Eastern Cape. I'm a grain farmer and a potato farmer. I also serve as a board member at Potato SA, representing Eastern Cape developmental farmers. I think I should start with you, Louis, so that we come back with introductions. Can I say Louis Junior? Louis Senior, yes.
Yes. Thanks, Mzim. My name is Louis de Kock, as Mzee has pointed out. I'm one of the founders of an online marketplace called Nile.ag, which we started about 5 years ago, and which we're also currently operating.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Wolfhard. I'm the Sustainability Director for PepsiCo South Africa. I've been with the business 10 years and 4 years in this role. And the key priorities in this role is to implement our ESG strategy in South Africa, which is centered around 3 pillars. Firstly is positive value chain, which is really focused end-to-end supply chain, water, climate, energy, and our packaging agenda. Secondly is positive choices, which is really about transforming the nutritional profile of our offerings to consumers. And then lastly is positive agriculture, which is focused on 2 key elements: regenerative agriculture and also sustainable sourcing of our key commodities and ingredients. And of course, potato being a massive part of those ingredients.
My name is Carmen Miller. I'm from the University of Pretoria. I'm a research consultant at the university, working in agriculture, human nutrition, and consumer research, consumer science. And I also grew up in a farming family, so I have a true passion for agriculture and everything that agriculture involves.
My name is Louis von Ziener. I'm retired, so I'm nothing. My career was in banking. I serve on the board of First Rand or First National, and have a wonderful opportunity to plow back and assist and help wherever I can.
Thank you, Louis. My role is very simple today. I'm going to be asking you questions. As a farmer, we don't really understand what consumer wants, because we supply direct to traditional markets, and they deal with consumers, and we don't really look into market developments or what changes. So most of my questions are we going to dive deeper into understanding what really consumer wants, what is changing or what is not changing, and how can as farmers adapt on those changes. But just 1 minute from you, Louis Senior. When you came across this topic, what came into your mind?
Well, you know, I think normally the question would be, what change are we talking about? And I think the big thing today is if we take a step back, is what is different in your world? But you then need to just lift it and say, I think the challenge for us today and the opportunity lies in a consumer today that have a lot more access to data and information to take informed decisions. So your customer comes at your product with a lot more information than in the past. It comes with a need for a healthier solution. It comes with sustainability in mind, thinking about green, thinking about the future. It comes with a demand of convenience. I've got little time. And then, I mean, the volatility of habits. Those are, I mean, understanding your consumer and your customer so that you can produce, provide, and solution in the best possible way.
Thank you. Comment?
I think our South African consumer is very unique and diverse, so also driving towards our consumers there's different types of markets that we need to access, and we need to approach each one of these markets in a different way. We can't approach our high-income markets the same way that we do the informal markets. So the uniqueness of our markets is something that we need to embrace within South Africa.
Thank you. Stephen?
Yeah, I think, there's definitely a big trend towards sustainability in the markets. And I think the need to innovate is strong. And then just taking some pointers from the discussion earlier, it's just about how we do that in a responsible and controlled manner to make sure we meet those demands moving forward.
Yes, I think the development in technology has never been quicker than what it is today. And specifically on the digital side, there's so many opportunities for us as farmers to start to embrace. So I think a panel like this is very important for us to create awareness among our farmers about the opportunities out there to embrace digitization, and also to brainstorm ideas how we can practically implement it within our operations.
Thank you. So my first question goes to you, Louis. You mentioned something about change being an opportunity than a threat. What is one single biggest thing that consumer change that potato farmers should prepare for over the next 5 years?
I think, no one has that crystal ball to say that's what it is, because again, you can go to Claude and say, what is that need, and you'll get the response. The issue is to understand, in my opinion, your consumer, your customer is, the makeup is a different makeup altogether. And you need to make sure that you retain the good of the past, but add the best of their current needs, wants, and priorities in your single product. Therefore, I cannot go away from the change in the consumer is a consumer today that takes a much more informed decision than just acting by how we did it in the past. And you must stay ahead of that behavior.
Thank you. Tikok, we are slowly moving to a digital world. And my question is, how can technology help farmers reach consumers more directly? without any increase on costs, especially in rural areas and where logistics are still a challenge.
Yes, Mzee, so technology and specifically e-commerce can definitely be used to connect farmers more directly with consumers. And I think there's a lot of examples internationally where this has been done quite successfully. So for instance, in China, we have a very successful e-commerce platform called Pinduoduo that started off by connecting rural farmers with millions of consumers across China, specifically around group buying. So it enables groups of consumers in cities in China to buy directly from farmers, aggregate the demand, and then obviously facilitate these transactions. And then obviously, we have to think of the South African context, because the fact that it works well in China doesn't necessarily mean it will translate well in our context. The reality is in rural areas that you're referring to, like the Transkei, for instance, where you produce, we don't have the dense population density that we have in countries like China. And so it means our route to market would be different. We also trading in a commodity potatoes with very low value density. So, the value of the rand per kilogram is extremely low, probably some of the lowest of all categories, across the grocery offering. And so it means our e-commerce solution has to be tailored to this reality of, what we have in South Africa and the rural context. So yes, we can definitely use technology. There are e-commerce options, but there's some principles that has to be in place. I would say like you would typically need an aggregation point because of the sparseness of our population. And these aggregation points preferably have to be in places where there's high commuter traffic. So for instance, in taxi rank areas. And secondly, we would need a system that can actually govern these hubs. Because if we have hundreds of aggregation points across the Transkei, we would need a system to make sure that demand is perfectly allocated. We would need to make sure that farmers are actually better off through the price mechanism that they charge and from recovering the logistics to those specific areas. So it is, to answer your question, technology and e-commerce could be used to address this problem, so connecting farmers more directly to consumers. There are international precedents to this, but we have to make sure that it's contextualized to our local dynamics.
Thank you, Louis. Stephen, more customers are starting to understand or are knowing more on what they eat daily. So they are starting to talk about sustainability, ESG. So which sustainability practices will soon become essential for farmers, especially the farmers who supply retail and end markets?
Yeah, thanks, Mzee. I think maybe to start off with, like Louis Senior alluded to, the consumers these days are informed, and they want to know what they're consuming, what's in the product, where does it come from, how it was produced. And I think, with that as context, it's key to understand, like, the consumer really wants details of what they are consuming. I think in terms of practices, basic practices on farm, things like equitable labor practice, responsible management of chemicals, water efficiency, etc. I think those are basics that need to be in place. I think the consumer now is at the point where we're getting to the next level. And I think just looking at longer term, sustainability of farming, it's all underpinned by soil health and making sure that we've got healthy soil to grow our commodities and crops in. So, practices related to that, I don't think it's a blanket approach of we can define, 3 or 4 practices and say that's what needs to happen. I think there's so many various, factors that influence it. There's different climates, microclimates in South Africa, soil types. If we look at the Sunveld and the sandy soil, we've got up to, Limpopo and the different types of soils, different biodiversity. So I think it's really about using those, healthy soil indicators and making informed decisions to make sure that, long term, that this is a positive thing, and that the consumer then understands exactly what's gone into the product. So I alluded earlier that, there's some basics that need to be in place. And I think, the more the consumer becomes educated and the more the consumer becomes aware, the more these more complex and more detailed sustainability narratives are going to become critical to do business.
Thank you, Stephen. Come in. How are you?
Good name is Z.
I'm okay. From your experience, how can the potato value chain together strengthen demand for potatoes while positioning themselves with an important part of healthy affordability and solutions to food security challenge.
I think for food security is when all people at all time have access to health-sufficient, safe food that they can consume. And for a product to fall within that category, you work on the 5 pillars of food security, with the first one being availability. And luckily in South Africa, we have availability of potatoes. They are available and fresh all year round, so that's fantastic for that part of food security. And then we have utilization, which is the second pillar of food security. And utilization means the product provides nutrients in the correct form and the body can utilize the nutrients that we get. And once again, potatoes are fantastic for that pillar. And then we have access, and access falls both under financial and physical access. So not just that they need to get to the potatoes, but also that they have financial access to potatoes. And that is one of the pillars that we struggle with food security, with the price volatility of potatoes, and also access to a form of where they go get on a taxi, spend that money once a week or once every second week and go and do their shopping. And if there are not potatoes available at the price point that they can afford or that they expected the potatoes to be at, they just don't buy potatoes that week. So that's one of the things that works on for food security is access with potatoes. And then stability. With our lower income market, stability is very important to them when purchasing a product, when it comes to price. They have a very limited budget that they work with, and they need that price of the potato to be consistent. They can't absorb price volatility as the higher income market. And then the last pillar of food security is agency, which is a new pillar that was added a few years ago, which gives the consumer input into, they also have a say in what they consume, how they consume it, and how they want. And they specifically added agency to food security as consumers had a bit more of a say in how they want to consume, what they want to consume, and what they want to pay for that. And then also when these lower income consumers purchase all of their products, not just potatoes, it's not something they purchase on a completely different level than what most of us in this room would purchase. We have a protein and consider, what are we going to do with this tonight? What's going to be the addition? These consumers see potatoes purely as a budget line in their food or a budget item within their budget. It's not something that they have an emotional connection to. It is purely based on price and what is going to fill my stomach and what's going to fill my kid's stomach for the least amount of money and keep them sustained for the longest amount of time. Now, taking their budget into consideration, at the moment, the minimum wage is just about 5,000 Rand a month. And to purchase a thrifty food basket for a family of 4 costs about 4,000 Rand. Now, the thrifty food basket provides a family of 4 with more or less the nutrients that you need to sustain a healthy lifestyle. Now, considering the minimum wage, considering the healthy food basket and all the other costs that comes out of this, the majority of the South African consumer spends about 1,700 Rand on groceries every month. And of these groceries, they have very set parameters of what they can buy, how much they can buy, and what they can do with this, and how long it needs to keep them sustained. So this is an opportunity for the potato industry where we already luckily fall within the 17 staple foods that the majority of the low income market consumes. Now, these staple items are maize meal, tea, sugar, oil, salt, sugar, flour. And of all of these 17 products that are within this most commonly consumed and purchased products, potatoes and onions are the only biological products that have not been highly processed. So it's a unique place for potatoes to be in. They are purchased as is, cooked as is, and then consumed. But the problem with that also being, they know they can buy a bag of maize meal. It costs them 62 Rand. They can feed the family 10 meals from this bag of maize meal. While in the case of potatoes within the informal market, and as they mentioned, this market doesn't go to formal retail. They buy along the street, they buy the little whippy of articles that are packed out there. If last week they could buy 5 potatoes for 10 Rand and feed their family, that is what they plan to do next week again. If they come there the following week and now they can only buy 4 potatoes, what are you going to do? Go inky pinky ponky between your children and choose which one you don't give a potato to? So that confuses the consumer. So it leads to a problem for them, as they're not regular buyers of potatoes then, because there's not that price consistency. They need that consistency to be able to plan. And we want potatoes to stay within those 17 staple products that they buy on a regular basis. So that potatoes is I want to say a boring purchase. They don't need to think about it. It just needs to happen. They just need to buy their potatoes. We don't want potatoes to become something that they buy when it's cheap, when it's on sale, when it's on special. It needs to be something that's constantly, like Louis mentioned, it needs to be in the forefront of their mind. When they go to the stores, potatoes needs to be one of the first things that they need to buy.
Thank you. Potato SA has core businesses. One of those core businesses is marketing, where they try by all means to convince South Africans to consume more potatoes. I think this question is going to be to my full panel. If it happens that consumption is not growing as fast as how producers are, or they're planting more potatoes, or as fast as production, what can the industry do to make sure, or to convince that South Africans are eating more potatoes? You can start, Louis Senior.
I think, I want to just take a step back and say, what do we do is at the heart of your question. I take a step back and say, I'm possibly going to leave some of the practical stuff at the product level to other members of the panel. But for me, some of those in the audience, I also serve on the board of Mayala, a citrus company in the north. And quite often, Edward, who's the founder, would say to me, these youngsters mustn't be in the offices, they must be out in the orchards, they must be out on the ground. And then I say, ek dink die tyd het 'n bietjie verander. They actually should, some of them must be in the office to work with that data. Now, why I say that, how do you get a consumer to use more of your product? It must go back to what lies at the core of customer needs and wants. What lies in what happens in the environment. To understand that and to address it, to get to the root cause, to inform a decision is critical. And that, in my opinion, today speaks to economic conditions, it speaks to regulation, it speaks to a myriad of other issues. It's a much more complex decision to be taken that needs to consider a lot more information. And it calls on us to be a lot more proactive, to test the market, to work in smaller groups, see what works. Not everyone, it's not always that easy to have the solution, but we must anticipate, we must see what happens elsewhere, and we need to translate it to what is relevant to our market, and we need to test it.
Yeah, Muzi, I think there's also a big role for us to play around education of the health benefits of potatoes in general. I'll give you an example of a rural hub where we've got a distribution point in the Eastern Cape. We have demand forecasting models that forecast exactly the quantity of every product that we should expect to sell in these rural hubs. And interestingly, we picked up that a very specific product, orange sweet potatoes, were outselling almost 10 times what the models were forecasting for that specific region. And yet we couldn't keep up with the demand that was for those specific products. And many of you may know that orange sweet potatoes is not really a very popular line locally. It's not something that's consumed in vast quantities locally, yet in this specific location, there was a massive need for it. And so when we did a bit more research, we realized that for whatever reason, that local municipality in that area did a drive on health benefits of different food types, and orange sweet potatoes was singled out by them as one of the products, that's very nutritious and that's good, for various different health reasons. And that just shows you the impact that education around health benefits could have for consumers, because that led to a 10x increase in the demand for that product compared to what, objective model would indicate. We also spoke earlier about the affordability of the products. In that very same location, because we're able to connect farmers more directly to consumers, at certain points of the year, we're able to sell more than 100,000 punnets of blueberries in the lower consumer market. I mean, you would never think that the lower income market could consume 100,000 punnets of blueberries in a very small location within the Eastern Cape. But that comes to show also the need for our consumers to buy products that they consider to be healthy and to be nutritious. So I think in summary, there's definitely a lot of work that we as a producer organization can do around education of our consumers around the benefits of potatoes and fresh produce in general.
Thank you. Anything?
I think from the informal market segment that it's not getting them to purchase potatoes once, but getting them to incorporate potatoes more often into more meals more consistently, to get that consistency of potatoes, that it's a consistency that we have in the market and that they consume with it. Once again, that it stays a staple, that it's not a purchase for a fancy event or purchase when it's cheap or purchase for a specific reason, but have them more often in more meals.
I think just, Mzi, to add to that, also back to the point I made earlier, push your solution, your product, your brand, push it to the consumer. Mobile as a device and the information you can push and the change in behavior because of the easy access to information informs decision making. And we need to ensure that that is how we operate in markets.
Thank you, Louis. To you, Louis Jr., why do farmers sometimes receive low prices while consumers continue buying with high prices? How can we close this gap, or can the industry be able to close this gap?
Yeah, so it's quite a loaded question, and you're putting me on the spot. And there's definitely a debate that's been raging for many years. I'm sure the fathers and the grandfathers of the farmers sitting in this room probably had the same debates around their braais and said, like, why is there such a big gap between what we get and what the consumers are paying? There really is two main factors that's driving this. On the one side, the cost inherent to our supply chain, and specifically the fact that there are too many intermediaries within our value chain. To me, it's surprising that with all the technology, with all the distribution capabilities that we have today, that we still need to have 6 or 7 middlemen involved in many of the potato transactions that are conducted today. That really just shouldn't be the case. And so I think the cost of all the layers of intermediaries involved in the industry, and specifically the number of people who are not contributing or adding value that still makes a living just from being in this value chain, that is a serious concern. I think the second part is obviously the margin expectation of retailers. We all know that fruit and veg, and including potatoes, is one of the categories where retailers has the highest margin expectation. And this is a problem because it obviously increases the price of potatoes. But Carmen also mentioned the 17 bulk or staple categories that consumers typically would look at. And these are all substitute products for one another. So, if a retailer, for instance, has a high markup on potatoes, but on the other hand, they subsidize these bulk commodities like maize meal, like rice, like flour, it means relatively potatoes are actually outpriced versus all these other commodities, and it has a direct impact on the demand for the commodities. So from my perspective, that's probably the biggest concern that we should have. But what can we do about it? That's obviously a difficult question. The first thing is we need farmers to take a more active role in the marketing of their produce and making sure that they choose partners and they work with partners where the value chain is healthy, meaning where there are not many different middlemen involved in the transactions that they deal with. This also implies that farmers would have to beef up their marketing function, because we all know it's very easy to send our produce on consignment, hope for the best, and allow somebody else to make a decision on our behalf. So farmers really need to start thinking about which channels are strategic, which of the channels have fewer intermediaries involved, and then also secondly, make sure that their marketing function has the ability to cater for these different channels, because it definitely is more work to supply directly and to cut out some of the middlemen in the chain. The second interesting thing is, although farmers cannot impact the margins that retailers are charging, we can learn from other industries, and specifically in the food sector. So there are quite a big trend from producers in many of the other perishable categories, where they're starting to sell more directly to consumers, setting up their own outlets. For instance, one of the biggest independent mills in the country set up their own distribution network in the Eastern Cape and Northern KZN. We've got more than 40 hubs where they sell their own maize meal directly to consumers. The biggest pork producer in South Africa sells through more than 50 outlets almost the majority of their pork directly to consumers under their own brand. We see independent broilers of chicken across the country setting up their own shops in taxi ranks and close to the consumers, in many instances selling most of their produce actually directly to consumers. And that also coincides with a trend that we're seeing at the lower end of the spectrum of our consumers, where they're typically time rich but money poor or financially poor. So it means they're willing to shop around. They don't need the convenience of a one-stop shop. They're willing to walk from shop to shop to find the value that they need. And so, to summarize it, I think there's a big opportunity in the next couple of years for fresh produce also to emulate what we've seen in the other categories, to set up better routes for us to supply directly into the consumers. And it's not inconceivable to have a situation where we have more farmers selling, through outlets directly to consumers. Yeah. In that way, we can also then start to reduce that margin premium that we're currently seeing.
Thank you. Thank you, Louis. Back to you, Stevie. As an upcoming farmer or developing farmer, just from your experience working with the food companies, what practical sustainable steps that are expected by the buyer from us as upcoming farmers in future? Where can we start without any adding unnecessary costs?
I think that's the quandary right there is, how do you do it? And then you don't have that base scale without adding costs. My background is I always come back to sustainability and having a longer term view and how to build longer term relationships on this. I think, short term, any type of cost in the business just doesn't make sense. So I think it's really about understanding a longer term roadmap and building relationships with, food producers such as ourselves. Yeah.
Thank you. Comment from your experience or consumer education perspective, what is the most practical message we can use to reposition potatoes as nutritious, versatile, and affordable without making the message sound technical or disconnected to everyday households?
I think there's a variety of messages that are relevant to the different groups that you can send out, but I think it's having a clear, consistent idea of potatoes are filling and they fill the gap that you need. And also, as one of the previous panelists said, of getting the younger generation, getting them young and getting them early. Lessons that we learned from the National School Nutrition Program and from working within schools that we saw with soya and with pilchards that are served within these programs. An opinion about food is formed at a very young age. And if you have a positive experience with food and form this positive experience at a very young age, you have that consumer for life. So getting your consumer young and pulling it through and getting that, once again, placing potatoes as a boring food in the diet. It's always there. You don't have to worry. When you open the cupboard, it's there. So ensuring that potatoes are there. We found with the peanut industry that 82% of South African consumers over all of the income classes have peanut butter in their cupboards. Yet they don't classify peanuts as a cultural or a heritage food. It's just something that's always been there and that they always buy and replace with. So getting potatoes into that cultural heritage, it's something that's just always there, that provides comfort, that provides certainty. So getting that message across that a potato will always be there for you, it will always sustain you, it will always be on the market at a price that you can afford.
Thank you. As we heading towards the end, I think just one more question to you, Louis Senior and Junior. Do you believe we will have more potato sales through digital platforms, and what must farmers do to prepare for that?
I think the benefit of being the elder on the forum is I can ignore the question and say, Louis, you can take it. I want to lead into Louis responding just to say that those in this room today, if you look at the journey of the potato industry, you can take confidence that you have seen a lot of change, experienced change, have gone through tough times, and here you are, relevant and in demand. That should give you confidence to tackle the future. And Louis, speak about the digital.
So I think most people in the room will agree that over time, more sales of potatoes will happen through digital channels. I think there will probably be few people disputing that fact. But I wouldn't say that's the case just because there's hype around it or because there's momentum behind digital channels. It really is because technology is improving at quite a rapid rate. And it has different implications depending on who's transacting online. So for consumers, this has quite a big impact on the convenience that they experience through e-commerce channels and obviously then the adoption of these channels. And I think we have to go back to when e-commerce and online trading started, the 1990s. Back then, it was really cumbersome to buy something online. It was not very convenient. And as a result, all these big e-commerce companies had to heavily subsidize all the produce that was sold online because, it took very long to get deliveries. It was quite a cumbersome process to check out when you wanted to buy something. Fast forward where we are today when, it's quite easy to check out online. Deliveries are made within an hour. It's more convenient now to buy online than, it is to buy in physical stores. But that was not always the case. And if we look into the future, we've already seen with the type of AI shopping assistants, Pixie, that Shoprite has launched. Recently, they've announced that within 15 seconds, you can add 10 items to your basket. That shows you like the improvement in convenience as we head into the future. And so from my perspective, that new technology, the AI, et cetera, would drive better convenience, which eventually would lead to more sales. If we look at the trading side of it, so being a farmer selling through online marketplaces, that's not so much about convenience as it is about technology enabling us to sell at a lower cost or more efficiently. And so again, there's a lot of developments in technology that will accelerate this trend of online selling. For instance, through AI verification of quality, there's a lot of apps today that you can use to verify quality of produce that's traded online. 5 years ago, that was really not a viable option. Today, with the technology, that is possible. And it's always been one of the big blockers of selling online is how do we verify the quality and the integrity of that quality process, for instance. Data modeling through AI becomes a lot easier. So, thinking about pricing and price determination through these models is a lot quicker and easier to do these days through AI than it was, let's say, 5 years ago. And again, so I don't think it's going to develop quickly just because, everyone is excited by it. I think it's because of the technology that's pushing the frontiers around like what's possible and what can be done. And maybe like on that note, 5 years ago, less than 1% of all potatoes were traded commercially online. Today, between 5 and 10% of potatoes are traded commercially in South Africa through online marketplaces. So although that's still like a small percentage of the overall market, it still shows you the trend and what we can expect, in time.
Thank you, Louis. I think to my full panel, I want another advice from you guys as a young farmer, or I want you to advise a first generation farmer, knowing that we have three biggest costs that we are facing while we are producing. So we have to cover, or we have to implement infrastructure. We have costs to pay for machinery. We have production costs, which is works with working capital and everything. So we have those big three costs. So if you were to advise me today as an emerging farmer, which one would you focus on? Firstly, production efficiency, marketing, technology, sustainability, or consumer engagement, and why? Senior, you can start because
So, as somebody that comes from a farming background myself and working more on the marketing side today, I must be honest, the key is still to make sure that production is done well. As it doesn't help as an emerging farmer that you've got a very nice social presence or media presence, or you distribute well, but you don't have good products. I think the starting point will always be to make sure that your production is done efficiently, that it's done well, and that the quality speaks, to your processes. It is interesting, though, as one of the actually executives of quite a big co-op in South Africa pointed out to me the other day, that farmers always want to haggle a lot when they buy their inputs. They put a big emphasis on negotiating and making sure that they buy fertilizer at the right price. Yet many of them neglect actually the premium that they can get through marketing well and distributing their produce well. And so while I would say that I would think it's important to focus on production and the efficiencies there, when it comes to stakeholder engagement, probably like the latter is more important. So making sure that you actually select your channels right, because that's probably where the biggest margin differential lies.
Thank you. Anything, guys?
So, Mzi, looking from my family experience and listening to what happens around the dinner table, looking at production efficiency, small things like the cost of ripping your land if the ground is too compacted, and the amount of diesel that goes into the tractor, doing the calculations of where can we save a little bit if you don't let the cattle graze on this land and compact it and have to rip it again. How can you have very efficient ways of farming that you don't have that don't create unnecessary input costs that you need to produce at the end? So all of them have a very important role to play, but I like to have production efficiency to ensure that you get bang for your buck for every rand that you put into your soil, that you ensure that you get optimal output from that.
Thank you. I think before we close, can I open for any questions on the floor?
We done.
We did well.
If there are no questions, thank you.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to customers, you shouldn't only put your customer hat on, you should be putting your customers, and that's many. The customer market is diverse. And it's certainly, there's not only one customer. They've got different needs. And I think when we look at trends, it's very important to watch trends. What are the trends? So many, many things happening in front of you. But again, we looked at yesterday your observation skills. It wasn't great. So you've got to sharpen up on your observation skills in terms of trends. That's obviously very important. It's customer needs and wants. It's hard to sell to customers what they need. It's easier to sell to them what they want. I know we want to sell them what we think they need, but they're going to buy things what they want. Customers don't change their ways unless there's urgency. Nobody's going to suddenly buy more potatoes just because there's a reason. People do things when there's urgency. When your toilet is blocked, you call somebody urgently to come and fix it, or your drain, not necessarily your toilet, but the drain with me. There's urgency. And I think that when consumers change their ways, if there's urgency regarding price, it's become very expensive, or other foods have become more expensive. And some other buyers buy it because because of health reasons. But there needs to be urgency. And I think through marketing, you potentially create that urgency. So listen to customers. That's why you have 2 ears, right? What do they want? When do they want it? Where do they want it? Yeah, so the future market will only reward those who grow well. Not only who grow well, but it will reward those who understand the customer best. So we also like you to taste the FarmWise potato products outside in the break. And again, visit the exhibitors outside and observe and learn from them. So before we do the break, Cindy is just going to do a quick, she says afterwards, all right. So we are going to then have the morning tea. And tea it is. You've got half an hour.